Welcome to the January Global TMC Community Meetup. My name is Juning Su. I am the Community Manager of Threat Modeling Connect, and I will be your host today. If you're new, welcome to the community. Welcome to our Global Meetup. This is our community's monthly gathering, a safe and supportive space for us to share challenges and swap ideas. Every month, I found myself personally looking forward to this event, as this is where we as a community coming together, learning and collaborating in real time. I hope you feel the same way. So this month, we are diving into a topic that's been a constant challenge for many practitioners in our community, newcomers and veterans alike: success and metrics for threat modeling. We're thrilled to have Caroline Wong as our speaker today. She is currently the Director of Cybersecurity at Teradata, and before that, she has held many executive and senior leadership roles at world's top tech companies. She has even written an entire book on security metrics. Her insights into measuring the success of threat modeling among other security initiatives have been some of the most impactful ones in the industry. We had the pleasure of having her at ThreatModCon and as one of our keynote speakers last year. And ever since then, have been hoping that she could share her insights with the rest of our community. So I'm very, very excited that she can join us today. Great. Very quick on today's agenda. And if you've been to our global meetup before, you will notice that our agenda today is a little different. Following the presentation, we're going to have a Q&A session with Caroline. Thanks to all of you who have pre-submitted your questions as you register for this event. So we're going to address those pre-submitted questions first, but we'll be sure to leave around 5 to 10 minutes towards the end of the Q&A section to address live questions. So we're also taking questions live. You can use the Q&A options on Zoom to submit your questions. And for everyone, I would encourage you to upvote the questions, 3 questions most interesting to you. So if time allows, we're going to address 3 or more live questions, or as many as the time permits. All right, so without further ado, I am going to pass the floor to Caroline.
Thank you so much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you all today, and especially excited that we have so many folks here from all around the world. So wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and thank you so much for taking the time to be here. I want to share a little bit more about my background. I've worked in cybersecurity for about 20 years now, and I've had a variety of different roles. So some of those include in-house security team roles, similar to my current role at Teradata, but I've also been on in-house security teams at eBay and at Zynga. I've also had a number of different solution provider roles. So product companies, management consulting companies, a startup. The place that I actually learned the most about threat modeling was at a time when I worked for a place called Cigital. And at Cigital, this is the organization which at the time was running a program called BSIMM. I'll talk a little bit more about BSIMM as we get into the presentation. When I was in San Francisco with this group in the fall of last year, gosh, I can't believe it's already 2025. That feels like it was just yesterday. One of the things that came up was security metrics. And I wrote this book in 2011. It was inducted into the Cybersecurity Canon Hall of Fame in 2022. That's one of the proudest things that I have about my career. And I'm delighted always to be talking with folks about metrics. I wish that there was a PDF that I could share with you that is the list of, best practice metrics. And throughout the years, I've actually engaged with a number of different expert community groups trying to put something like this together. But the thing is that it never works. And the reason that it doesn't work is because every organization is different. Every organization has a different risk tolerance, a different level of investment, a different level of maturity. And so while there are some basic things between many different security programs, they are sufficiently different that I have found that the most effective metrics are going to be unique for each organization. As I was going through some of the questions that folks submitted as they were registering, which I thank you for, there were some about this question success. And actually, for cybersecurity professionals, success is a very funny word. You know, classically, it has been said that a successful day for a cybersecurity professional is one in which nothing bad happens. Um, I think that is very overly simplistic. And when I think about success, I actually think that it's understood throughout an organization and particularly at the executive level. It's understood what are the risks to the organization and what's being done about those risks, even if what's being done is nothing. To me, success for a security program means that there is discussion about risk tolerance, and there is visibility of risks. I think of threat modeling as one exercise that security professionals and technology professionals can do together in order to identify risks. And then, if it's aligned with an organization's risk tolerance to address those risks by making a change, then it's important to track those things. I don't know if people here are as obsessed with Wicked as I am. But as I was putting these slides together, I couldn't help but think about this song from the movie and the musical Wicked. Um, in this picture, there's a character, Fiyero, and Fiyero is a little bit of a rebel and a little bit of a bad boy. And he says, the trouble with schools is they always teach the wrong lessons. I thought that that was a really good concept to bring up today and also to think about when it comes to threat modeling metrics. One of the most challenging things about threat modeling, which somebody brought up, um, uh, they said it very well in one of the pre-questions. They said, you know, threat modeling is somewhat qualitative. The value of threat modeling is somewhat qualitative. And if we live in a quantitative world, if we live in a culture where numbers and data are king, then how do you ensure that threat modeling is paid the proper amount of attention? And while it's not easy and while it's not convenient, I do encourage everyone on this meeting to consider that when you're performing threat modeling, what's most important is less about the letter of the law and more about the spirit of the law. And I think that spirit is captured extremely well in the threat modeling manifesto. When I began to learn about threat modeling about a decade ago, there was this air about it. There was this perception that only the most senior and the most technical security professionals could even begin to think about doing threat modeling because it was so hard to do. It was so complex and it required so much expertise. And I actually disagree with that. Um, I I believe very much in the threat modeling manifesto, and I think that um, you can have a person or a group of people that have a variety of different levels of experience, years of experience, skill sets. Um, Fundamentally, if the folks performing threat modeling have a solid understanding of a business or an organization and its objectives or its mission, um, and a reasonable understanding of the different technologies involved and how they work together, then I believe that any of those folks can absolutely do a great threat model. You do not require 30 years of technical information security experience to be able to do a great threat model. You just need to know what your organization is trying to accomplish, and you need to have the curiosity to try and find out as much as you can about how technology comes into being at that organization, how it works together with other systems. I want to talk about two frameworks that I think are a pretty not bad starting place. Because one of the things that I've learned is that when it comes to metrics, and this is a little bit nuanced because just a few minutes ago I said, there's no right answer. There's no perfect answer. I don't have a PDF that I can email to you that you can just follow step by step and do it. At the same time, what happens practically sometimes to a security professional who goes into a meeting and proposes something totally creative and unique is that they get questions and objections from other people. And some of those questions and objections include, how do you know your idea is any good? And one of the tools that I think we can use in order to defend our ideas are frameworks, whether they are industry frameworks, whether they are best practices. In some cases, we can use the compliance or governance stick in order to help us get things done. But two that I want to highlight today are BSIMM, and then the second one is OWASP SAMM. So for folks who may not be familiar with BSIMM, BSIMM stands for Building Security in Maturity Model. It's sort of a project, like a research initiative that started in 2009. And what's different about BSIMM from a lot of other industry frameworks is that it's a descriptive model, not a prescriptive one. I think this is pretty cool, actually, because there are many models in information security that say you should do scans, you should do pen tests, you should do threat models. And there's a lot of good stuff going on there. But what's different about BSIMM is that because it's a descriptive and an observable model, BSIMM says, look, there's a group of real life organizations that have agreed to be assessed in a fairly standardized way. And the activities in the BSIMM, which is updated every year, these describe the actual activities that are going on at these organizations. So right now in 2025, we just, as an industry, we just received the latest version of the BSIMM, which is BSIMM 15. And this comes from data from 121 real life companies. And what's cool about that is while there can be a lot of good ideas, and frankly, there can be a lot of bad ideas, for an idea to be strong enough that it withstands any sort of ROI analysis, return on investment, for it to be strong enough that an organization is actually going to dedicate very scarce and certainly finite resources towards it, that means something. For an activity to be operational, active, and observable, that means something. And it's cool. And one of the neat things about BSIMM is it evolves, it changes every year. Now, BSIMM is not perfect by any means. And, there are things that I wish were different about the BSIMM. One of them is I don't consider it to be particularly accessible. So, right now we're just looking at the architecture analysis domain for BSIMM, which, for all intents and purposes, architecture risk analysis is somewhat equivalent to the term threat modeling. And these are good ideas. And it's really cool that people are actually doing them in real life. But I find that the language of the BSIMM is, it's just not that accessible. And I think that while it's cool that there's 121 firms in the BSIMM, there are tens of thousands of software security groups, people who would benefit from doing threat modeling. So this is a little bit of a representation of organizations that for the most part are on the higher end of maturity and also have a relatively high level of investment available for doing software security. Now, I would like to contrast that with OWASP SAMM, which I consider to be more accessible. Literally, if I just look at this slide, it feels like it makes sense to me. I can read these words and they make sense. If I go back to the previous slide, you look at this and immediately the first thing you think is like, oh my gosh, like that is a lot of big chunks of text. And if you have what it takes to really get in there and think deeply and, read the whole thing, all, 130 pages of it, then it's valuable, but it's not as accessible in my mind as SAMM. Now, SAMM is, as far as I understand, prescriptive and not observable or descriptive, but still really, really helpful. And I think that OWASP SAMM is an excellent place to begin thinking about threat modeling, metrics, and success. I think that, if we look at strain B over here on the right, these maturity levels are pretty reasonable. Strain B, maturity level 1 says, are you doing threat modeling? Maturity level 2 says, are you doing it in a standard way that allows you to do a lot of it throughout an organization? And the maturity level B says, are you constantly trying to make it better and better and better? And what I like about that is it acknowledges that you got to start somewhere. You got to start somewhere, and maturity happens one step at a time. So let's go through each of these. Here's another cool thing about SAMM is that it gives you the answer. Are you doing threat modeling? Are you doing threat modeling for high risk applications? Are you using industry standard checklists? Are you hanging on to the results of that threat model? Is that going into some sort of tracking system? Do people ever refer back to it? And these answers can give you some idea, and it would be straightforward to design your own sort of weighting and algorithm in order to think about these different inputs and get a number. Similarly, for maturity level number 2, are you doing threat modeling in a standard way? Are you training people? And what I like about this, you train your architects, security champions, and other stakeholders on how to do practical threat modeling. There's a concept in here that I really like, which says, Threat modeling is not just for information security professionals. Threat modeling is for, it's a way of thinking. Your threat modeling methodology includes at least diagramming, threat identification, design flaw mitigations, how to validate your threat model. Here are just some of the basic components of, as you mature a threat model, how do you go from 0 to 1? How do you go from 1 to 2? And so on and so forth, And I think that for any given organization, you can design appropriate success metrics, and they can be focused only on maturity level 1, or focused on maturity level 1 and maturity level 2, or focused only on maturity level 2 or 2 and 3. You get to make it up in order to figure out what is going to benefit your organization the most. Because a company that's trying to get started versus a company who's actually pretty good at it, they're going to want to examine and report on different aspects of it. I am just a couple of minutes away from where we transition into the Q&A section, which is actually my preferred section for stuff like this. I think it's more fun. And what I want to share here is taking a step back. So the security metrics book that I wrote came out in 2011, and now it's 2025. And I have had a lot of evolution in my own thinking about security metrics. And one of the things that I think today is that one of the most valuable outcomes of successful security metrics is that information security leaders can use effective metrics to communicate well with other stakeholders. So one of the most obvious and really important use cases for this is information security leaders need to ask for budget. And then they need to justify how they're spending that budget. And then they need to demonstrate what desired outcome they're getting. And I think that a great way to start that conversation, because that really does have to do with understanding an organization's risk tolerance and trying to match up an organization's technology environment and behaviors and activities to match that risk tolerance. And you can't just go into a board meeting or an audit committee meeting and say, hey, everyone, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling about risk tolerance today? That is not going to work. These particular items, which as I'm looking at this, I realize number 4 got repeated. It's because I took what used to be number 7 and I moved it over. I think of the things on the left side as being boring and the things on the right side as being interesting, but I think they're all useful. What I like about these statements, so let's take the second number 4, for example, prevent the same cybersecurity problems from happening over and over again. This is a risk management objective that a security leader and a business leader can both understand and potentially say, yeah, we agree that that would be a really cool thing. We want that. It's also sufficiently specific that an information security leader can take a statement like that. We're going to prevent the same cybersecurity problems from happening over and over again. And they can turn that into a plan that is associated with a budget. And they can design measurements and data to demonstrate progress towards meeting that objective. Now, I happen to have a whole course online about this whole risk management objective thing, and I invite you to check it out. You can watch it at no cost simply by going to my LinkedIn. You're going to scroll down and go to featured posts. You're going to click on the 4th post, which has this picture of me wearing a pink dress. And then in the comments, you're going to find a link to Security Metrics Insights, also known as how to ask for security budget and get it. So if you are more interested in that topic, I encourage you to do that. And I think that it might be group photo time before we go into Q&A.